Welcome to Faith and Sustainability, a podcast where we look deeper into how our faith traditions inspire us to care for our common home. I'm your host, Leonard Robinson.
And I'm Kat Doyle, your co-host. Want to let everybody know that this podcast is made possible through the generous support of Jamie Lanier, the Varlamov Family Foundation, Georgia Interfaith Power and Light, St. Francis Services, and Semco Atlanta. Okay, Leonard, what's on tap today?
Well, first, do you realize this is season 3 of the Faith and Sustainability podcast? So we want to kick it off in a big way. And you know how I always talk about special guests? Well, we have an extra special guest today. We've got Bishop Joel Konzen of the Archdiocese of Atlanta, who also serves as the chaplain for the Laudato Si Initiative. Welcome to Faith and Sustainability, Bishop.
Thank you, Leonard.
Okay, tell us about your background and your education.
Background would have me growing up in a small town in Ohio, a little rural community, kind of a farming community. My mother's family were farmers, and so that's the context, but a very closely related to the Catholic Church context. Church was kind of everything that our lives revolved around. And didn't go to Catholic school. We didn't have a Catholic school in town, so I went to public school. But my family was very religious, and at a certain point, I kind of caught the bug and said, I think I'm going to want to go deeper. And so by the time I had gotten to 8th grade, I did what many people in that time did. I took off for the seminary in 9th grade. And, that was the beginning. It was the years when the Second Vatican Council were coming to a close. I left in 1964. Suddenly the liturgy had moved to English, and the documents of Vatican II were around, and we were beginning to read those. And I would say that one of the big influences for me was reading Gaudium et Spes, just to begin to get an understanding of the church in the world and to realize that we really do need to look at where the church fits into a modern world and some of the challenges that we're all going to be dealing with, and some of the ways that we might want to position the church in the future to dialogue with the change that's going on. From there on, I began to be aware of Leo XIII and Rerum Novarum, and as we went on, I think, again, Church of the 70s was probably very much attuned to the social gospel and our responsibilities for that. So those are just some of the pieces in my background. That one of the things I remember very distinctly is after 9th grade, we had a young priest in town. He wasn't the pastor, but he was assigned in the summertime to visit migrant labor camps. And he asked me, did I want to go along? And so I asked my parents, and they said, yeah, that's fine. Do it. So we visited these migrant labor camps where folks came from Texas and picked tomatoes and cucumbers and so forth. And, just to see the conditions that they were living in, and what was a real eye-opener for me. In the beginning of an understanding, my dad was a pharmacist, and in the evenings he volunteered as a pharmacist for the clinic for the migrant workers. And again, that was an opportunity. I went along. It was an opportunity for me to kind of see the conditions that were pretty different from the rest of the folks in town. And it opened my eyes and gave me an idea that there is, there's a lot of need for understanding and a lot of need for trying to create the conditions for better employment as well. So
you are speaking my language now. I mean, all of the social action, social justice, of course, that's what I do. I grew up in small town Ohio also.
Maybe there was something there.
There might have been maybe something in the water, right? But I love what you said about the fact that as you read these documents, these rich documents that the church has, how they led you to dig deeper into the social issues, and farming and the environment and care for creation kind of all come together. So when we approached you about being the chaplain for our Laudato Si Initiative. Sounds like maybe some things clicked together there.
I think so. I used to spend summers at my grandfather's farm. I am definitely not a farmer, but just to get up there and to kind of be a part of that world where all of my cousins who were farmers were coming and going, and the things that they were talking about, their concerns, pretty different from a lot of the things. My classmates in seminary were mostly from cities, and as I say, I can't claim to be a farmer, but I was aware at least of what some of their concerns were, and what I think all of us were going to learn to be concerned about farming and how it fits into the larger fabric of American society. But yeah, I think the getting an education somewhat close to the earth, I think, probably didn't hurt.
It's a little bit of integral ecology there, right?
Exactly.
And a real live example.
When this Laudato Si Initiative was created, what moved you to say, "Hey, I want to be the chaplain for that"? How did that come about?
Well, it came about because Kat brought it up to me,
There we go.
and
Guilty.
you can imagine that happens sometimes. Kat brings up ideas, and people say, that's a pretty good idea. Well, it resonated with me. I have felt committed to the idea that we are going to need to be involved in having a stake in the future of our created world that good God has given us. And I believe that whatever we can do to somehow ameliorate our surroundings, our situation, is going to be good for all. I think we've had some erosion maybe over my lifetime of some of the interest in what I would call the common good, which I think everybody used to more or less buy into and say, yeah, I get that. I have a responsibility, and I'm willing to talk about my part in that. I think it may be a little harder these days to reel people into that conversation, and again, it just means that our work is all the more important.
You were talking about maybe things have changed up a little bit. Let's back up a couple of years before you came in here as bishop and you were working in the school environment as an educator. And I understand at that point you brought in a sustainability person into the environment, and it brought about some changes.
Yes, that's right. We were, I think it was a bit of a step for us out onto a plateau. We had a science teacher and asked if she would devote herself part-time to sustainability efforts within the school. Well, one thing leads to another, and before long she was full-time in that role and rolling out ideas one after another. These are things that we can do. Let's have an electronics recycling day. Let's have, these are things that we hadn't really been thinking about too much. But before long, we were doing a lot of things that were conserving water. We were changing to LED lighting. There were a lot of things that we took on. But I think the most important thing, it was in the context of a school. So we were hoping that this was going to be transformative for the students and for the faculty. And I always remember we had a CFO of all things who on their first day on the job, we used to have a big town meeting with all the students and teachers, and she got up and gave a talk on very simple things. Don't leave the water on while you're brushing your teeth. I can remember that.
Sounds like my parents, yeah.
These are things that probably a lot of the kids had never heard. But the sustainability person has made a tremendous difference, and it helped me, I think, to see that's one way to make a difference, is to assign somebody to have ideas, to get them cleared, to let it sink into the pores of the community, and then also do some level of instruction about it.
Oh, once again, singing my song. I love that. And it sounds like what you were experiencing was a culture change.
I think you're right. Yeah, and of course one has to be careful because you unless you come back and test 4 years later or 10 years later, you're never too sure whether the cultural change was whether it achieved what you were trying to do, whether it had staying power or whether it was temporary. But again, in the world of school, you have to believe that all these lessons do make a difference. Otherwise, you would not be there.
And you may have told us already, but at what point did you come to that intersection of faith and sustainability?
I think it was always there. I grew up in a household where we didn't waste. Both of my parents were adults at the time of the Depression. They were older when I was born. And so my mother was working as a teacher. My dad was a pharmacist and owned a drugstore. They were very thrifty. So we saved boxes and bags, and now I save boxes and bags. And, a lot of that just was transferred, I think. Again, we have to remember growing up in the 1950s that middle class then meant you probably had a car. It wasn't new. You had a house with a mortgage on it. You might have had a television, or you might not at that point. But middle class was pretty bare bones compared to what sometimes we think of it today. And then, I didn't go to Catholic school, but we did have Saturday catechism classes, and the Mercy Sisters were very good about instructing us about the rest of the world and the inequalities that exist in the world. So we had our little mite box during Lent that we put our pennies into, and that was going to go to the mission somewhere else in the world. We got National Geographic at home, which allowed me to kind of get a picture of what the rest of the world was doing, and it was pretty different sometimes from what we were doing in the United States. So I think all of that combined to say, if you're going to have faith, it can't be in any way divorced from how we see the earth figuring into that and how we care for creation as a result.
It's very interesting as I hear you talk, and I remember this from my parents, that sustainability was kind of woven into that middle class or that working class farming homes, because it was the same with me, that it was woven in. And we've in some ways gotten away from that. So do you have any thoughts or what do you think about how do we get it woven back into the fabric of life today?
It's a good question. So much of because things were simpler then, we did not have as much disposable everything then. If something broke, you took it to the repair shop and you got it repaired. We saved soda bottles so that we could take them back and get 2 cents or something for them. And there wasn't as much that was available that people were careless about. I think we were all more careful about how we use things. Our parents lectured us, kindly about the way we use things and how we should be careful. And you put your gloves in your pocket because these have to last, and et cetera, and things like that. So as far as what we do today, again, we have to use opportunities to educate. That's for sure. And our schools present a great opportunity because, of course, in a Catholic context, our schools are church schools, and they not only can, but they ought to reflect our teachings, and we ought to be there saying, when we do evaluations of curriculum and experiences in the schools, is that part of what we believe our young people are receiving? And if not, why not? So certainly that is the case. And, of course, I'd also like to see parishes involved in that in a similar way. You don't have to have a paid person all the time, obviously. Having somebody who has a real interest and is willing to be a volunteer leader for the parish in the area of ecology, sustainability, I think is certainly a worthy goal for our parishes and our schools.
when we're looking at that, how do we find that person, or how do we encourage that person with that passion to step into ministry?
I'm not a pastor, and so therefore I can say whatever I want to and preach all kinds of things about pastors, what they can do and should do, and so forth.
Preach, Bishop, preach.
But I would say they can do a couple of easy things. One is to address it from the pulpit and say, this is something I'm looking to do, and I'm just asking for those people who have an interest to let me know. Here's how you can let me know. And the other way is to do it in the church bulletin and or through your parish council members who might know of somebody. But I think a simple altar call, if you will, that says, here, this is a direction that we want to be going in, and maybe some of you already have thoughts about that. Maybe some of you have experience in that, and so I don't think it's too hard probably to get the word out. And again, it doesn't have to be a paid. It makes sense in the beginning that it wouldn't be a paid position. It's just who has the interest and who has a little bit of time to get us organized.
This is the 5th year of the Laudato Si Initiative and the 10th year of Laudato Si. And then the Pope recently, he delivered Laudate Deum, and there goes my Latin again.
No, you're right on there.
Okay, Laudate Deum. Can you kind of discuss your thoughts on Laudato Si as it relates to Laudate Deum?
I found Laudato Si to be a wonderful foundation document. It really helped, I think, me and the church to have a blueprint for where we could be going and should be going, and it legitimized the whole sense of care for the earth, that this is not just something that folks are waving banners about, but it in fact is related to our faith very fundamentally. And I think it did us good to... Now, again, it's not the first time a pope has issued something. I mean, if you go back and you look at some of the pieces from John Paul, as well as I said, Gaudium et Spes, you'll see very, very encouraging and comprehensive calls to be good stewards of creation. So I think Laudato Si was very fundamental. What I noticed in Laudate Deum was a sharper, maybe just a sharper call, maybe even a little rap on the knuckles that would be saying, we got to get busy here, and there is a lot more we can do, and let's not be either deniers or let's not stay away from this for fear of one thing or another, for fear that we are offending people, for fear that somehow we're threatening anyone's livelihood. I think it addressed some of the questions that might come up or have come up, but it also addressed the failures that our societies have probably experienced in the time, certainly since Laudato Si, and at a time when we had reason to hope that maybe we would be galvanizing people's attention and efforts more than we had.
So it's as we embrace this green movement, this call to action, if you will, the Pope was very specific that this wasn't just for Catholics.
Yes.
He really wanted us to engage with everyone, all those people who call Earth their home, everybody. So that means that this has an interfaith and an ecumenical feel to it. Any thoughts on maybe how we go about that, or are we doing that well as a church?
Well, then, if you're going to ask me that, then I suppose I would start by saying, are we doing well in ecumenism, period? I think we've lost a bit of the luster on that trail in the last 50 years, and I can talk about things in terms of 50 years. I do remember when we were doing more pulpit exchanges and Thanksgiving collections, interfaith things together. So I don't know what the answer is about how we come together to do that. I would say if we're not already doing other interfaith things, it may or may not be the one piece that brings us together. It could be because it's a common interest that should apply across the board and shouldn't be specific to any one particular faith. But again, I think it depends on how serious we are about our other interfaith efforts in general.
We've sort of talked about we have to do this. It's a call of our faith. Is there a moral imperative to us as Catholics to say, this isn't a choice you can or can't make. You have to live this way?
I certainly think so. Again, we've lost a little bit of the tendency to speak about what we once termed social sin. Ethics today has become much more of a personal concern rather than a communal concern, and obviously it's both. Our reading of the gospel would say we need to be concerned about both. So yes, there is a moral imperative, and the moral imperative, of course, is to see that there is a planet around that we can hand off to our upcoming generations, and that it's in relatively good shape, or that we have at least done our part to see that we haven't compromised it so much that it's hard for those who come after us.
Bishop Konzen, thank you for coming on the show, helping us kick off season 3 of this podcast. And thank you for being the chaplain for the Laudato Si Initiative.
You're welcome, Leonard. It's been a real pleasure.
We are super appreciative that you took the time to share some of those thoughts, and to really, part of what we want our listeners to know is that this is more than just a couple of us sitting around the table. This is the church. And as a bishop, as a leader, we thank you for coming and putting voice to that. So
thank you, Kat, for giving me the opportunity.
We do appreciate it.
And there'll be plenty more in the future, trust me. And we want to put together an initiative that you'll be proud of. Okay, well, everybody, stay connected with us on social media and share your journey with the hashtag Faith and Sustainability.
And don't forget to like us, and be sure to subscribe to the podcast so you'll know when our new episodes are going to be available. So until next time, we look forward to meeting you
at the intersection of faith and sustainability.
The preceding podcast is a production of the Roman Catholic Archdiocese of Atlanta. Copyright 2025.